Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? Good morning. It is, what day is it? It's Tuesday, April 17th, 2018. Is everything working okay here? I just noticed that I am, well, it looks like everything is feeding, but for some reason my soundboard shows up red on my podcast virtual, whatever the hell you would call it. I don't know. That's technical talk. It's very early in the morning, 9 o'clock, ready to start a show. Apparently I'm not, but it sounds like everything's going out A-okay. And it looks good from this end, and really it is better to look good than to sound good, I guess. We can rely on that. Donald Trump is apparently awake and tweeting from Florida. Nothing terribly outrageous so far. Sometimes I like to check in on what's happening. They're complaining about the border and insisting that everyone is talking about the fantastic tax cut bill, about which, of course, no one is talking. It is, I guess it's tax day today, the 15th having fallen on a Sunday. I thought they used to give you until the 16th because the 15th is a Sunday, so mail it on Monday. But I guess they figure you'll forget on a Monday, so they expanded it to Tuesday. I don't really know why anybody did that. Hopefully that routine audit over at the IRS is winding up and we can find out about Donald Trump's taxes sometime soon. Of course, no chance that he would actually share those with us at any point in the future, near or otherwise. It is curious that he claims, the power to fire the special counsel directly, but he can't get the IRS to finish its work on their audits. It's very odd. They have been working on the audit for longer than he worked on actually preparing the taxes. And by that I mean, I include all the time that his so-called accountants spent preparing the taxes. I don't believe for a moment that he had anything to do with it, of course, as many people do not. That's the most normal thing about him, is that he doesn't do his own taxes. And that doesn't surprise me at all. I'm curious why he feels like he can't rush that to a satisfactory conclusion. Of course, that would obviously look like he was interfering, like it was some sort of, obstruction of a just form of checking on people's taxes and making sure they're paying what they ought to be paying. And we wouldn't want to do that. Now, would we? All right. Well, it's Tuesday, and that means that we're on our own for figuring out what the hell happened in the news today. So we can turn to Pocket and see what we put away in the last couple of days. We can turn, of course, to Daily Kos and scan the front page. Oh, look, there's a cartoon from Jen Sorensen today. That's always a treat. All the cartoons are, of course. And we can check out today's abbreviated pundit roundup just for a change in voice. Georgia Logathe just put this one together, as opposed to our good friend Greg Dworkin. Our good friend Georgia did it today, but Georgia so rarely comes on the air to discuss it with us. Sean Hannity, that guy is in the news, and how and why is the big question. Of course, we found out yesterday, after speaking with Armando for a little while, about the upcoming court appearance by Michael Cohen, at which we anticipated he would be ordered to reveal the name of his alleged third client. We speculated a little bit about who it might be and why he wouldn't want to reveal that name on his own. And of course, nobody guessed, I don't think, Sean Hannity was the client, because there's no reason in the world why Sean Hannity should be a client, which, of course, I guess leads us to wonder, why don't we believe Sean Hannity when he says he's not a client? We're in a bit of a conundrum. And I wonder, I don't know how the court is going to react to this. I mean, Hannity's statement that he's not a client isn't 100% clear, and it's not made before the court, so the court doesn't necessarily have to take any particular notice of it if it doesn't want to, but it's a very strange situation. Of course, most of Michael Cohen's business, I guess, such as it is, comes from non-legal work. He has He said he had, I don't know, some small list of clients for whom he performs work, but for whom the work is not chiefly legal work, that he has only 3 legal work clients. And they're a motley group as it is, even without Sean Hannity. I mean, well, it's barely a group if it's down to 2. Donald Trump, nobody wants for a client, obviously. But that's the guy who's taken on the job. So he's got Donald Trump as a client. And remember, we did manage to figure out that he claims to be in private practice at this point. And, that's even questionable. And I meant to say on yesterday's show, to Armando. And Armando, by the way, by all means, if you have more to say about this or any other subject, you're more than welcome to come on and share those opinions. And you have you got 2 invitations here. 3 invitations and 2 endorsements, I guess, of maybe 1 invitation. All right, you have 1 invitation. 1 person wants you to be in the air. 2 people endorse it already in our comments today. 1, of course, Thelonious08, who was the commenter who put out there that we had such good shows last week and you were worried because you hadn't been on the air last week. And he says the show was even better this week. That would be yesterday, because Armando is back, or with Armando back. Or he may mean despite, but he says with. So that's good. We'll take it as good news. And more than just Thelonious, Gil Aquino also says the same. Looking forward to today's podcast. Hope Armando makes an appearance. So doors are open. We talked a little bit about who might be that third client, and I guessed that perhaps it was Felix Sater, because I was stupidly looking for a somewhat legitimate reason, or a person who might, a client with whom Michael Cohen was familiar, whom he might reasonably have been expected to establish an attorney-client relationship with at some point, and who would have perhaps a somewhat legitimate claim to a necessity for for confidentiality and privilege with respect to that relationship. The excuse being his peculiar relationship with the FBI and Trump, of course, but the Trump part wouldn't help you. But with the FBI, in other words, he has a history with our justice system and before our courts at having his name and his involvement in certain inquiries before the court kept quiet at the behest of the FBI. So it made a certain amount of sense. And that was my problem. It made a certain amount of sense. We should have been looking for answers that didn't make any sense whatsoever. And then we would have been on the right track. Because when they finally gave that over, man, there's no reason for Sean Hannity to have hired Cohen as an attorney. I mean, is Sean Hannity, does he claim to be an attorney? I have this vague notion that he might be an attorney himself. And that doesn't at all mean that he doesn't need an attorney. Every attorney really does. When they are in trouble themselves, it would be foolish to borrow a phrase, to represent yourself. That doesn't, of course, mean that certain people won't be that foolish. In fact, it was pointed out to us yesterday by Kate Sherrill, among others, that Michael Cohen did, in fact, at some point say that maybe he ought to represent himself in all of this, and that he was the person best suited to the job, and that may be true, but of course it's an awfully foolish thing to do. Now, I see nothing about Sean Hannity being an attorney in his Wikipedia profile. In fact, I see nothing about his having graduated with an undergraduate degree at any point either, having, according to Wikipedia, having dropped out of NYU and Adelphi universities. So, that doesn't tell me much about his anything. But I don't know. I guess I got the sense that he was the sort of guy that would hold himself out as an attorney just because he was, self-righteous and full of himself. And you know how attorneys are, and that very often accompanies post-secondary and postgraduate education. Because, hell, that's hard stuff, and you ought to be proud of yourself. But, no, he's just arrogant and foolhardy, not an educated person with an advanced degree. Okay, so I'm wrong about that. I don't follow Sean Hannity close enough to have had any serious confidence in having said that. Anyway, still, even though he's not an attorney himself, of course, you would need an attorney. But I guess my question is, why Michael Cohen? Michael Cohen did not have a successful practice of any kind, and really, honestly, if I'm looking for an attorney, right, and I happen upon somebody that I'm considering, this wouldn't necessarily be outcome determinative, but if I said, so how many other clients have you got? Who do you represent? Do you have a portfolio of clients that makes sense for me to see myself included in? And if the answer is, well, I have 2, I say, well, I mean, are you new at the attorney game? Well, no, but I did leave. I just recently left my job, switched to a new firm, whatever. Okay, but they only assigned you 2 clients? You only brought 2 with you? What exactly is going on here? You're brand new to the game, or you only just started at a new job? Or is it that these are long-term clients and they occupy so much of your time that I'm going to be an afterthought at best? These would be all, I think, legitimate questions that would occur to you if you found out that your attorney that you were considering had only 2 clients. You might wonder, well, why is that? Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Are you starting? Would I be a substantial part of your portfolio? Would I be an afterthought to your portfolio? Are the 2 other members of your portfolio, I don't know, accused serial rapists or child molesters? I would want to know this. You might want to know this. I don't know who you are. You could be anyone in the world, right? Maybe you stand accused of child molestation, and it's a good idea to find somebody who has those clients. I'm not saying anything about you or Donald Trump being a child rapist or anything like that. That's not up to me. That's up to the former Republican Tarrant County, Texas party chair. He likes to say that. And I let him do it. Anyway, it's just an odd combination of people. And I mean, I guess what it speaks to is Hannity has got a very strange relationship with Donald Trump. He's very much a Donald Trump hanger-on and cheerleader and sycophant. And it's almost as if he decided to hire Michael Cohen to sort of be like Donald Trump. I guess the guy I can't really figure out in all this is Elliot Broidy. I'm not really sure what he's doing in the mix. Like, Donald Trump has always worked with Michael Cohen. They deserve one another. It makes sense. Fine. Cohen's a terrible lawyer. He should be able to do a hell of a lot better. And he does have better lawyers than Michael Cohen by far, but he doesn't use Michael Cohen largely for legal work. Anyway, Elliot Broidy can certainly do better than Michael Cohen too, and that doesn't make any sense except insofar as, I have a pregnant Playboy model mistress. What do? I know who's the person I know who has dispensed with the most Playboy model, adult actress, pregnant or not, mistresses in the past, and had limited to no success whatsoever in keeping them quiet about it. Oh, Donald Trump. And why has he had so little success keeping it quiet? Well, it's just one of those stories that can't be suppressed. But Michael Cohen will try, and he'll send people to intimidate these women, and so maybe this would be the best course of action. It is not. It is the worst course of action, and I really have no idea why he would go there. Sean Hannity, I guess it's just sort of a hanger-on thing, and he figured he'd join in the party. I wonder whether he's covering up the same sort of stuff. He thought he would get out from underneath the obvious implication by saying, well, various things, including, no, I'm not a client of his, or maybe I sort of kind of am because I might have given him $10 once and asked him a question about, some personal matter. Well, what do you mean? Like impregnating a Playboy model? No. Real estate. Just a real estate thing. Totally innocent. I totally asked the guy who is under investigation for using real estate deals, notoriously and for years, using real estate deals to launder money, commit bank fraud, et cetera, now under criminal investigation for just such a thing. That's the guy I need for my real estate advice. Now, okay, maybe he didn't know that was coming, but that's just because he's an idiot. But yeah, I mean, you could perhaps have done a lot better if you just had a few questions about, I'm thinking of buying a new home. Should I have it inspected first? Yes, you should. I don't even need to be a lawyer to tell you that. Curious. One day, perhaps we'll find out what it was that they talked about. But in the meantime, lots of other questions looming. I did open this piece that is sitting up near the top of the recommended list over at Daily Kos. Parkos, not Marcos, but Parkos. That's a great handle. I should sign up under the name of Schmarkos and see if that works. I don't know what's going on here, but Parkos has a great question. Why did Squire Patton Boggs pay Michael Cohen $500,000? And unanswered question, unasked from yesterday, as I was going over the letters that were submitted to the court on behalf of Michael Cohen that Armando was reading us, and retracing the path of his legal career. It occurred to me yesterday, didn't I just hear that he actually just started working for a major connected law firm, and Squire Patton Boggs more than qualifies there. And it wasn't a surprise that a close presidential confidant would land there. It was just a surprise that this close confidant to this president would land anywhere, much less Squire Patton Boggs. But they're pretty political, so, it makes a certain amount of sense. It's just that Michael Cohen isn't politically adept or a good attorney, and his only clients really are people who are also filthy, disgusting human beings, I guess, who are now politically connected by virtue of the fact that Donald Trump has whatevered his way into the presidency. So why did Squire Patton Boggs pay Michael Cohen $500,000? I am a much better attorney. I won't get anything close to that from Squire Patton Boggs, even if I leave my house and ask them if they'll hire me and prepare a resume and do all that stuff. I'm way behind when it comes to getting $500,000 from any law firm on that question. So let's see. Do we have an answer? Maybe it was just because he was a stylish dude, says the caption to the photo of Michael Cohen. He is not. Tongue-in-cheek there, Parkos. As someone experienced with law firms, says our author here, I note that it takes some doing to spend money where there is no promise of return. So I have been puzzling the association between Michael Cohen and Squire Patton Boggs. SPB is based in Cleveland. I don't think I even really knew that. I know them from their Washington, D.C., a very highly connected Washington, D.C. office. And was an early entrant into Eastern Europe. Okay, that's helpful. SPB opened a Prague office. How about that? In 1991, and has offices around the world in Moscow and Kiev. Those are not, it says, advertised on their website. But they're among many, I'm sure. They're not their only foreign offices. They are eyebrow-raising these days. But almost all major firms with an international presence will these days have a presence in Moscow. Probably Moscow used to be enough to cover Ukraine, but probably in the last 10 years or so, they've moved to open Kiev offices as well. Pretty commonplace, I think. I find it interesting, our diarist continues, that in 2017, SPB paid Michael Cohen $500,000 as an association fee. Seeing as Mr. Cohen apparently brought in no clients, what was the rationale for the relationship? More interesting, what was the source of the money? Was it from one of SPB's clients, or was it just an energetic effort to develop business with a graduate of the unesteemed Thomas Cooley School of Law. I had heard the other day that Cohen was not a graduate of any particularly distinguished school of law, but, it's a school of law nonetheless. If it's accredited, it's accredited. Somebody's got to be on the bottom of the list. Coincidentally, SPB is one of the firms that is advising Cambridge Analytica. Wink, wink. The firm also represents Gazprom, as well as numerous local governments around the United States. Gazprom, of course, the Russian natural gas, state-owned natural gas giant. Oh, there is an edit here at the bottom that simply says, after thinking about this for 12 hours, I guess there's no answer except this one. If one was trying to get this done within a law firm, it might go like this. X, who is a client, will make a $1 million retainer payment, but wants us to be associated with Michael Cohen with a relationship fee of $500,000. In the lobbying world, especially, and that's where I think they thought his value lay, law firms don't bill by the hour. There are many monthly retainers where no work is done. This is all pure speculation on my part, of course. I'm just trying to understand it. So we have no definitive answer here, despite the the promising sound of the headline. But he didn't promise anything. It just sounded promising. What is likely happening here is, Squire Patton Boggs has a fairly large lobbying practice, and they thought a guy who has the ear and confidence of the President of the United States makes a smart acquisition. $500,000 smart? Well, maybe. It's a feather in the cap of ordinarily. Once again, this is not normal, but ordinarily a feather in the cap to say you've got somebody who's got the president's ear on board. So if you're thinking of hiring us for lobbying or anything for that matter, our having access to Michael Cohen makes sense. So, I wouldn't look for it in terms of his bringing clients with him. My guess is that they just thought it was a good idea in the influence game. But this is a good possibility. Because he's such a money launderer, it makes a certain amount of sense to suspect that it's possible, and you could look around to see if you could uncover any evidence of it, but it might not be easy to do because of the nature of the type of work and the type of billing that they do there. It could easily be the case, yes, that some client, corporate or otherwise, could work out a retainer agreement with the firm with the idea in mind that, I'll pay you $1 million retainer right up front, but I would like to see Michael Cohen hired, and I'd like to perhaps use him in the future for lobbying, or I just want him parked there. And half of the $1 million should go to him. You get to keep the other half. If they say our finder's fee on Michael Cohen is $1 million, you say, all right, I'll give you $1.5 million. I need to get $500,000 to Michael Cohen without it showing up that I handed it to him, because then they'll start asking questions. But if I use my some incorporated entity to pay a law firm, and the law firm makes some decision to hand some amount of money to Michael Cohen, it might look suspicious, but ultimately it ends up beyond, it's beyond reproach in most cases. But it being Michael Cohen, I think you could probably develop some trail of evidence that might give you pause about it. But ordinarily, it's the sort of thing that investigators, if that's all they were faced with, if that's all they could find, they would simply say, yeah, this is going to be kind of impenetrable here. We're not going to be able to nail it down, but make a note in case we come up with something else later on. But like I said, because he's such an active money launderer, it raises questions. That happens. All right, let's see. What other items have we got in the morning circular, if you will? Let me head over to my own Twitter feed. Always a good idea. That's my notepad of last resort. Very often I'll comment on things or tweet things that I mean to take up on the show and never get around to standing to pocket. But we will see. Yes, right. Oh, the morning tweet from Bill in Portland, Maine. Although, it's mostly borrowed from today's I Got Nothing morning post. Yeah, it was a hell of a day yesterday, the whole Hannity bombshell. And, we're looking forward to seeing whether this new prediction comes true. By lunchtime, it will reveal that Lou Dobbs is a merman. I wouldn't bet on it ordinarily, but, stuff's getting crazy today. That's all I'm able to say. Lots of people found yesterday's events puzzling, to say the least. What we ought to stop on is news that you can truly use. News that the tough Russia sanctions allegedly, I guess I was going to say allegedly imposed, but really just announced. And they weren't allegedly announced. They were definitely announced. I think we all saw them being announced. And when I saw those announced the other day, and Trump followed up with comments along the lines of nobody's tougher on Russia than I am. And this just goes to show, I'm sure, that he meant to say I'm no puppet, but he didn't want to say the word puppet again. Ill-advised for him to do that. Those sanctions were finally announced, and apparently there was some reporting in the days since the announcement of those sanctions that he fought bitterly with his national security staff about even imposing those sanctions. But everyone was forced to admit, my goodness, he's pretty presidential. Here we are, despite it all, despite all the rumors, despite all the puppetry accusations, these rather severe sanctions, not terribly severe, but more than we've seen in a while, these sanctions were being imposed. And I did remind everybody at the time, and I retweeted myself just to prove it, it was April 6th, saying, yeah, these are maybe not going to come to fruition. Hold on before you heap praise upon him for showing that he's not a puppet, because you got to wait for these things to be put in place. And guess what? It ain't happening. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Good morning and welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's clear things up with a couple of comments that have come in before we even get back to the sanctions issue. Bill tells me that, the closure of D.C. tax offices on April 16th, that would have been yesterday, was due to the celebration of D.C.'s, and D.C. only, D.C.'s Emancipation Day. That escaped my notice because my own connection to a heritage of slavery stretches too far back for us to remember. I don't know. I guess we do know what day allegedly we had our Passover celebration. So let's see. Having marked the Emancipation Day in Egypt, I overlooked the Emancipation Day, of course, for our own slaves in this country. And I am familiar with the Juneteenth celebration, which of course would have to do with the wider Emancipation Proclamation. But I guess there is a separately marked occasion for the Compensated Emancipation Act, I guess covering Washington, D.C., back on April 16th, 1862. And so it's a major occasion. It's been some time since I've lived anywhere close enough to the district to have taken notice of the announcement of a parade happening there. But that's what was going on, and it had tax offices closed. Although, again, they don't, getting your taxes in the mail, I mean, I don't know. I don't know why they would give you the extra day, but I guess if you were saying, don't file on Sunday because you can't mail the things. I guess if the post offices were closed, that's something, but I don't know. Put it in the post office box. But why not mark the occasion like every other federal holiday and say, yeah, we would skip tax filing. Yeah, I'm in no rush to make everybody mail their cards in. We are filing on postcards now, aren't we? Isn't that simplified? No, it isn't? Okay, we still have to mail massive amounts of paper. All right, then. In that case, good idea. Give everybody an extra day. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I am just not a part of the day-to-day D.C. life anymore and haven't been for some time. And I might not even have noticed it when I was living there, to be quite honest. Okay, important news. Let's see. Back to the sanctions question before we return to other comments from listeners to the live show. Like I said, back when it was announced on April 6th, I was referring then to the New Yorker's piece, or the New Yorker's tweet about their piece anyway, saying, measured by proximity to Putin and the sheer amount of wealth affected, these are without a doubt the harshest sanctions ever imposed on Russia's super rich. There were, of course, several individuals, and I think the number was up near about 60, if I recall from the reporting over the weekend, where Trump was complaining about the harshness of these sanctions. It sounded like we were we were expelling something like 60 Russian diplomats, and there was sanctions against ultra-wealthy oligarch types, etc., all of which I assume was extraordinarily upsetting to the man who wishes he really was ultra-wealthy and invests every ounce of energy he's able to squeeze out of that limp sack of a body into pretending he's ultra-rich. That's got to be upsetting for him. The New Yorker piece was, in fact, a piece entitled The Moral Case for Sanctions Against Russia. I don't know. Do we need to make that case to the rest of you? But I was chiefly interested in the way they put that and saying that they were the harshest sanctions ever imposed on Russia's super rich. And I just felt it was important to remind people at that time, these are the harshest sanctions ever recited aloud by government officials or government types, with the intent that we understand them to have been imposed, or to be imposed, that is. But they are not the harshest sanctions ever imposed because they haven't been imposed yet. And while under normal circumstances, and these circumstances are not normal, under normal circumstances you would say, yes, you're being pedantic in saying that they haven't been imposed yet, they've just been announced. Yes, within hours they will be imposed, and then fine. Then your stupid point will fall by the wayside and have been exposed for the pedantry that it really and truly is. However, these circumstances not being normal, we're talking about the Trump administration, which can turn on a dime over just about anything, although would Donald Trump really turn on a dime? He would want to turn on a gold Krugerrand, I'm sure. That's the only thing I'll turn on. Anyway, and it's the only thing that turns me on as well. Although we suspect that there's more. Like being spanked with a Forbes magazine or whatever, just theoretically. So anyway, in these circumstances, if it hasn't been done yet, then you have every reason to doubt that it will ever happen, especially something like this. And even if it has been done at this point, there's pretty good reason to suspect that it might be undone. And that's kind of weird. That's not normal. And here it happened. I'm looking at a piece tweeted around today, or was it yesterday? Yeah, it would be yesterday, April 16th. From the Washington Post, Trump puts the brakes on new Russian sanctions, reversing Haley's announcement. Nikki Haley, our ambassador to the UN, for the moment, because she might just give up and go home forever. having been essentially again, any other UN ambassador under normal circumstances would have been mortified and would be considering resigning right now. But somehow, probably not Nikki Haley. I'm looking at the tweet, by the way, from the Post that goes out this morning with this piece attached to it. And it's got a photo of her at the UN raising her hand in a vote in the, I don't know what, is that a Security Council meeting or a General Assembly meeting? I can't tell from the photo. I'm not that UN adept. But I'm just sort of staring now at this photo because she's seated at a table, and I can't bring this photo up when I open the piece. They have video that must contain this. It must be a still frame from this video. But it looks for all the world like at the table, I don't know who she's sitting next to, but it looks like they have a mug of beer, which it's probably, I think it's just a pitcher of water, which is picking up coloration. Oh, you can only see the very top of the water surface there. The pitcher's half empty, or some would say half full, but it's there. I think it must be just reflecting other colors, and it makes it look like yellowish, like it's a stein of beer, but it's in fact a pitcher of water. How odd. But I assume that she's not, maybe she's sitting next to a delegate from Germany and he's drinking beer. That's less an issue, though, than the sanctions. Let's return to that. Let's see. So Philip Rucker, Carol Leonig, usual lineup here. Greg Jaffe, Anton Troyanovsky involved in this piece on the byline. President Trump on Monday put the brakes on a preliminary plan, and that's all it was, a preliminary plan, to impose additional economic sanctions on Russia, walking back a Sunday announcement by UN Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley that the Kremlin had swiftly denounced as international economic raiding. Preparations to punish Russia anew for its support of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's government over an alleged chemical weapons attack in Syria caused consternation in the White House. Haley had said on CBS News' Face the Nation that sanctions on Russian companies behind the equipment related to Assad's alleged chemical weapons attack would be announced Monday by Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. But Trump conferred with his national security advisors late Sunday and told them he was upset the sanctions were being officially rolled out because he was not yet comfortable executing them, according to several people familiar with the plan. And these would be, I guess, sanctions for a totally different reason. I wonder whether he confuses them the way I do, apparently, here. Not as a set. There was the expulsion of the 60 diplomats was supposed to be in response to the poisoning of the Russian exile and daughter, so exiles, in the UK, in Salisbury. And he was reluctant even to impose those sanctions. And I know we have an article set aside somewhere about his grousing about having been forced to expel so many Russian diplomats. But I guess this is another round of sanctions on top of those, this time geared toward the Syria situation. Administration officials, to continue with this and see if there's some overlap here, said the economic sanctions were under serious consideration, along with other measures that could be taken against Russia, but said Trump had not given final authorization to implement them. Let's see. Right, so that's obvious. Administration officials said Monday it was unlikely Trump would approve any additional sanctions without another triggering event by Russia, describing the strategy as being in a holding pattern. Sometime after Haley's comments on CBS, the Trump administration notified the Russian embassy in Washington that the sanctions were not, in fact, coming, a Russian foreign ministry official said Monday. And is that trustworthy? I don't know. The Trump team decided to publicly characterize Haley's announcement as a misstatement, which is amazing. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders said in a statement Monday, we are considering additional sanctions on Russia, and a decision will be made in the near future. Privately, another White House official said Haley got ahead of herself and made an error that needs to be mopped up. Well, I don't know about that. Another administration official, though, expressed skepticism, and maybe there are several here, officials, expressed skepticism that Haley had merely misspoken They said Haley is one of the most disciplined and cautious members of the cabinet, especially when it comes to her public appearances. She regularly checks in with Trump personally to go over her planned statements before she sits for television interviews. She doesn't want to make a mistake. That's not a good thing to do, even in this administration. Although, honestly, usually the mistake is better than whatever the president had planned in the first place. The problem is that whatever the president had planned in the first place is subject to change into whatever he comes up with in the second place as soon as he talks to a second person. Haley issued no clarifying statement on Sunday after news organizations, including the Washington Post, reported prominently that the new sanctions would be announced Monday based on her comments to CBS. Asked Monday morning why it had taken 24 hours for the administration to walk back Haley's comments, one White House official said only that there had been confusion internally about what the plan was. The sanctions were developed in recent weeks as part of a ready menu of potential military and economic measures for Trump to enact to strike back at Assad's government and his Russian patrons, according to senior administration official. In early March, following a relatively small-scale chemical weapons attack in Syria, Trump was upset that there was not a ready set of options. So, then National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster prepared a series of measures that were not enacted. And then H.R. McMaster became not the National Security Advisor. But the late March poisoning of a former Russian double agent on British soil, here we are, led the Trump administration to trigger the first round of economic sanctions on that menu and expel 60 diplomats in coordination with the European allies. So it's not unrelated. It's from choosing from the same menu. The reported chemical attack by Assad in Douma in early April set off a debate in the White House about whether the United States should trigger another round of economic sanctions to punish Russia. The president seemed to prefer those measures Friday night in a speech announcing strikes against the Assad regime when it was time to look tough, right? He promised to respond with all instruments of our national power, military, economic, and diplomatic. But it was unclear to officials whether Trump wanted to hit Russia with the next set of options on the sanctions menu or wait for another attack, according to the senior administration official. Isn't that an interesting position to take? Imagine, if you will, a Democratic president saying, under any circumstances, well, we'll wait for another attack. Some officials said the misunderstanding could have been the result of Haley's tendency to speak directly with the president, sometimes outside of the normal policy process. She'll usually talk to the president without the rest of the White House and get her remarks cleared directly, said the senior administration official. Often we don't know about them. That could cause problems, I guess. But then the president needs to step in with the rest of officialdom and say, no, I directed this. But no, he's nowhere to be found. He's playing golf. Early in the Trump administration, there were conflicts between Haley's team and the president on Russia. Shortly after Trump's inauguration, Haley delivered a speech at the UN that recommitted the White House to the Obama administration's policy on sanctions related to Russian aggression in Ukraine. Speech was cleared by David Kattler, then a senior official on the National Security Council, but the remarks frustrated Trump, who demanded to know who had approved them. Lots of people got yelled at, some by the president, said a U.S. official at the UN. Kattler, in turn, was pushed out of his job a couple weeks later in a reorganization of the NSC by McMaster, who then got pushed out. The White House officials said Trump has been impressed with Haley lately, particularly her remarks about Syria over the past week, and stressed Monday that the president holds her in high regard. Now she's fired, I guess. In the absence of a permanent Secretary of State, Haley has been the face of American diplomacy, playing an especially prominent role over the past week as the Trump administration responded to the attack in Syria. Haley said on Sunday on CBS, "You will see that Russian sanctions will be coming down." Secretary Mnuchin will be announcing those on Monday. If he hasn't already, he hasn't. And they will go directly to any sort of companies that were dealing with equipment related to Assad and chemical weapons used. So I think everyone is going to feel it at this point. I think everyone knows that we sent a strong message, and our hope is that they will listen to it. Our hope is it lasts until Monday. But it didn't. The Russians were listening. Russia, if you're listening, and they were. After Haley's comments, Kremlin Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov told reporters in Moscow that the sanctions were a U.S. ploy to oust Russia from international markets and constituted undisguised attempts of unfair competition. Okay, it's a tactic. The sanction campaign against Russia is truly assuming the nature of an obsessive idea, Peskov said. Work on the English a little bit. I mean, it's terrific, but needs some work. We still do not see these sanctions as lawful. We see them as going against international law. Certainly, this cannot have any relation to and cannot be motivated by considerations of the situation in Syria or any other country. I would call this international economic raiding rather than something else. But there was a subtle shift in Moscow toward a less confrontational tone, even as officials continued to slam U.S. sanctions as veiled attempts at gaining economic advantage. Russian lawmakers were crowing Friday that they were going to make the United States pay for already imposed sanctions. The already imposed ones, potentially by blocking American imports or U.S.-Russian aerospace cooperation, or maybe making adoptions harder, right? Or allowing Russians to violate U.S. intellectual property rights. That sounds pretty lawful, right? Russia, one top lawmaker promised, was going to hit the Americans in the gut. But on Monday, senior lawmakers in the lower house of parliament, the State Duma, and not D-O-U-M-A, the site of the chemical attack, but D-U-M-A, the site of, ordering chemical attacks, I guess, decided to hold off until May 15th before considering any counter-sanctions against the U.S. It was said that they needed to meet with experts and the business community first. Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov also urged calm. Let's first wait to see until these sanctions are implemented. He's a smart guy. We have to see what will be announced, at what scale, and who or what will become the targets of these sanctions, I guess, if they're ever imposed, we would have to add. So, there was apparently some great debate over the weekend. And I have another Washington Post piece here that goes to that issue. I mean, let's catch up with some of these pieces and fill in the parts of the background we need to do our own analysis later in the week. Trump, a reluctant hawk, has battled his top aides on Russia and lost. The president losing to his own top aides. That is pretty amazing for a decisive, decision-making, chief executive, businessman type guy who what he says goes. Don't you think? Greg Jaffe also on this one, so is Phil Rucker. John Hudson joined them on this for a Sunday evening publication on April 15th. So really wrapping up what they had heard over the weekend. President Trump seemed distracted in March as his aides briefed him at his Mar-a-Lago resort. What do you know? On the administration's plan. Okay, so some senior staffers plan to expel 60 Russian diplomats and suspected spies. The United States, they explained, would be ousting roughly the same number of Russians as its European allies, part of a coordinated move to punish Moscow for the poisoning of a former Russian spy and his daughter on British soil. We'll match their numbers, Trump instructed, according to a senior administration official. We're not taking the lead, we're matching. You would hope that a normal president wouldn't want that comment to get out there, but okay, leaks happen, more so to this administration than others, and it's sort of a cowardly thing to be caught saying. We're not taking the lead, we're matching. It happens a lot, on a number of fronts, and politicians, as we've heard innumerable times from Greg, they don't like to lead, though they like to say they're leaders. They don't like to lead. But really, honestly, we should have been taking the lead on this. But he didn't want to do it because he's a Russian puppet. The next day, when the expulsions were announced publicly, Trump erupted, officials said. To his shock and dismay, France and Germany were each expelling only 4 Russian officials, far fewer than the 60 his administration had decided on. And that is an interesting difference, isn't it? The president, who seemed to believe that other individual countries would largely equal the United States, was furious that his administration was being portrayed in the media as taking by far the toughest stance on Russia. That is amazing because, of course, you may recall that the president was portraying his administration in the media as taking by far the toughest stance on Russia. That was the selling point. Nobody is tougher on Russia than I am. Okay, is that true? Well, it actually kind of is. Look at this. He's expelling 60 diplomats, and Britain and France are expelling 4. Nobody is as tough on Russia as you or your government. Yes, well, the thing I forgot to tell you is I didn't want that to be the case. Now, it could be that he's simply saying, I'll make the best of a bad situation and at least try to claim credit for being the toughest on Russia. But it's awkward, to say the least. Returning to the article here, his briefers tried to assure him that the sum total of European expulsions was roughly the same as the U.S. number, and that makes some sense. There aren't going to necessarily be as many Russian diplomats in France or the U.K. as there are in the United States, simply by virtue of the size of, say, the consular staff here in the U.S. It's a bigger place, but it didn't matter. I don't care about the total, the administration official recalled Trump screaming. The official, like others, spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss internal deliberations. That's called leaking, but okay. We'll put some fancier terms on it. Growing angrier, Trump insisted that his aides had misled him about the magnitude of the expulsions. There were curse words, the official said, a lot of curse words, his favorites. The incident reflects a tension at the core of the Trump administration's increasingly hard-nosed stance on Russia. The president instinctually opposes many of the punitive measures pushed by his cabinet that have crippled his ability to forge a close relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin. That is, of course, not true. Trading dollars directly and in person with him will still, or signing contracts that allow for even more to be traded elsewhere, will still forge a close relationship with him. All you need to do is pay him a lot of money. And luckily we have a president who feels exactly the same way, so they're really on the same page here. The past month in particular has marked a major turning point in the administration's stance, according to senior administration officials. There have been mass expulsions of Russian diplomats, sanctions on oligarchs that have bled billions of dollars from Russia's already weak economy, maybe, and for the first time, a presidential tweet that criticized Putin by name for backing Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad. On Friday night, the United States, acting with Britain and France, attacked Assad's chemical weapons facilities, we think, as punishment for what they say was his use of agents on civilians. UN Ambassador Nikki Haley said Sunday that the administration plans to announce additional sanctions against Russia soon, and you know what became of those already. A White House spokesman stressed that Trump's Russia policy had been consistent and tough from his earliest days in office. It is not. And that the president supports the recent moves. He did not. While we would like to work with Russia, when faced with their malignant activities, malignant? On the international stage, the president will hold them accountable, Raj Shah said. I think misspoke, but okay. Some close to Trump say the recent measures are the product of an ongoing pressure campaign to push the president to take a more skeptical view of the Russian leader. If you're getting briefed by the CIA director on all this stuff, there's a point where, even if you're Donald J. Trump, you think, Putin's a really bad guy, said former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, an informal Trump advisor. By the way, if you're getting briefed, as they say, by the CIA director, are you getting briefed by Mike Pompeo? Is that the CIA director right now? Did we move on to the other nominee yet? Has she been sworn in? Let's see. Where are we in this? I have to actually check on these things. Pompeo, I guess, still holds the job. So you are, of course, being briefed not only by the CIA director, Mike Pompeo, but also the Secretary of State designate, Mike Pompeo. And that's, by the way, a fairly powerful combination of titles to hold. Of course, he doesn't actually hold the Secretary of State one yet. But, I mean, that's sort of I don't know if we've had that transition directly before. Now, we talked about the implications of moving a CIA director directly into the head of the Department of State, having some weird implications. But, even Newt Gingrich can have a point from once in a while. If the director of the CIA / your new Secretary of State, if things go as you plan them to go, tells you Putin's a really bad guy, and you still come away with, nah, he's not, then there's something wrong with you. And guess what? There's something wrong with Donald Trump. Back to the article. Others note Trump's ongoing unease with his own policy, because of course he doesn't make it. Even as his administration has ratcheted up the pressure on Putin's inner circle, Trump has continued in recent weeks to make overtures to the Russian leader, congratulating him on his election win, and in a move that frustrated his national security team, inviting him to visit the White House. And why not say that the move of congratulating him also frustrated his national security team, and then he fired them? That probably is worth mentioning. I think I could have a very good relationship with Russia and with President Putin, Trump said at a news conference just days after the largest expulsion of Russians in U.S. history. And if I did, that would be a great thing. And there's also a possibility that won't happen. Who knows? Oh, my God. What a guy. Okay, so he's president of the United States. This could happen, but maybe it won't. Also, who knows? You're supposed to know, but why bother with any of that? Trump came to the White House believing that his personal relationships with other leaders would be central to solving the world's thorniest foreign policy problems, administration officials said. In Trump's mind, such as it is, no leader was more important or powerful than Putin, they said, which is amazing because you would think that in Trump's mind, no leader is more powerful or more important than Trump. And maybe that's a given, and they say the second most powerful will be Putin. I don't know. A cooperative relationship with the Russian leader could help Trump find solutions to problems that bedeviled his predecessor in places such as Ukraine, Syria, and North Korea. It could. But, of course, he found out pretty quickly that it doesn't really work that way, and nobody actually likes him. We'll take a 1-minute break and return to this issue after this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Our top of the hour break being the short 1-minute one. We can dive straight back into this article. You know, at this point, I guess, again, under normal circumstances, I would say we largely know what we need to know about sanctions and the fact that there was an internal fight about them, with Donald Trump entirely unsure that he wanted to impose any of them at all, and say, we know what we need to know. But there's so much riding on this weird situation and so many other details. I don't want to skip anything because we have such a large puzzle to try to piece together. Let's see if we can get through the rest of it rather quickly and hit the highlights. When we left off, of course, we're reminding everybody, Donald Trump came to the White House thinking, I'm such a people person, I'm just going to be able to work out on a personal level all of these issues that have what did he say, bedeviled previous administrations. Obama, of course, chief among them. But the fact, he came in thinking the fact that there isn't peace in the Middle East and we're not friendly with Russia and every government in the world, and we haven't convinced the North Koreans to disarm and everybody to bow down to us, is we just don't have great deal makers in place. And I am a great deal maker, so I will go make those great deals. What we're learning, if we ignored all of the past and didn't learn it before, what the rest of us, I guess, are slowly learning is he's not a great deal maker at all. And that though he has a number of deals in his past, it is usually him saying either with people who he outweighs disproportionately, and I don't just mean physically, but financially, the deal making that he does is, the great deals that he makes is, I'll tell you what, I'm going to hire you to paint my new golf clubhouse, and I will pay you $100,000 to do it. And they say, it's a deal. And then you paint the clubhouse, and he says, all right, I really don't like the way you did the painting in the clubhouse. I'm going to pay you $20,000. and you say, no way, a deal's a deal, you owe me $100,000. Fine, then I'll sue you. And we've been through those stories, and you know how that comes out. That's the way he makes great deals with people who don't stand on equal footing with him. As president of the United States, purportedly, he is dealing with people that might not have the same, to put it as simply as possible, they don't have the same leverage militarily, economically, what have you. The United States, is sometimes described as the world's sole remaining superpower. So you'd think he'd be, on the one hand, you'd think he'd be able to bully people the way he does with painters and carpenters and contractors. But of course, that's not what we're dealing with. We're talking about sovereign nations. We're talking about situations that can result in war. We're talking about situations, really, though, none of that stuff seems to scare him. We're talking about situations in which there are other people who have voices in resolving or the situation or setting the parameters, and he's not in sole control, and they know that things can result in serious injury or death for everybody if they're not handled properly. And so he's not able to push people around in quite the same way. And then, of course, in other situations, there are other things at stake, or he just doesn't really have the kind of sway, between sovereign nations that he has with subcontractors and contractors to projects that he purports to own in their entirety. And so we see what really happens to his great deal-making prowess when he's dealing with somebody that doesn't really have to knuckle under to him. And his usual approach is, what if I say that I'm trying to develop a personal relationship with that person so that we can come to an agreement? And that's good cover for what he usually does, because coming to an agreement with somebody that actually has some leverage with him means knuckling under entirely, but saying that you're doing it because that person is such a close personal friend, as opposed to I was crushed in the negotiations. So he has to sit down and have chocolate cake with the president of China and then say later on what a fantastic thing it is that they've made him president for life, and don't we wish we had that in this country. Or he has to sit down or take the prime minister of Japan golfing so that when he loses in any negotiations with the Japanese or refuses or is refused by the military, his first option of withdrawing all American troops from Japan because they don't pay us enough money, whatever he thinks that might be, that it won't happen. So instead he has to say, well, we had a great time playing golf and we really learned to deal with each other fantastically on a personal level. And so he talked me into it for whatever reason. And he's such a good friend of mine. So I'm abandoning that particular promise. I guess that's the way he makes deals with people who don't have to listen to him. So, I thought we might skip over part of it, but in fact, that gives some context to where the article continues. Former President Barack Obama had a tense relationship with Putin. Trump said he could do better, but felt stymied by the media. He couldn't, in fact, do better because Putin is all about, dominating and destroying the United States and its ability to project its power around the world, if possible. So obviously that was going to make things tough with Obama. With Trump, maybe not, because Trump doesn't either care about that or know what it means or understand what Putin is doing about it. So instead, he blames his inability to have a truly good relationship with Putin, not on the fact that Putin has aims that run contrary to the best interests of the United States and Donald Trump, but that he has been, as he says, stymied by the media. Because the media is so sure that I'm a puppet, I can't just go out and be a puppet, and that's really troublesome for me. So he says he's felt stymied by the media, Congress, and Special Counsel Robert Mueller's probe into Russian interference in the 2016 election. All of that, you're all getting in the way of my knuckling under to Putin. Yes, we're trying. Any conciliatory move that he made toward Putin came under heavy scrutiny. Yeah, because you're a puppet. When, and he tweets here, when will all the haters and fools out there realize that having a good relationship is a good thing? Trump tweeted in November. They are always playing politics. Bad for our country. No, of course, protecting the interests of our country. You think that having a good relationship, no matter what the cost, is the better thing to do because that's what's comfortable for you because you're a gigantic man-child and you've never really held the responsibility for anything in your hands and delivered. So it doesn't bother you to undermine the long-term national interests of the United States because what do you care? One, you're 70-something years old and overweight and refuse to exercise, so how much longer are you going to have to sit around and watch this stuff happen to the United States anyway? And two, you don't understand what's happening in the first place, so even if you magically live to 100, you'll never get it. And, you know, if you're just living a blissfully confused life, just so long as everybody around you says, I like you, you have great cake, I love golf, you look fantastic, love your hair, then you're happy. Well, that's not enough to be president. All right, continuing again. Privately, he complained to aides that the media's fixation on the Mueller probe. Why would we be fixated on the investigation of the personal dealings of the president of the United States? Was hobbling his effort to woo Putin. I can't put on the charm, the president often said, according to one of his advisors. I'm not able to be president because of this witch hunt. And it's clear that he actually does feel this way. This certainly makes sense of his public pronouncements on this. But I love that. I can't put on a charm. Well, you can't. You're charmless. You're a lout. Everyone hates you. I can't put on the charm because the media, if they see me putting on the charm, they say that's a bad thing. You suck at it. I'm sorry. You don't have any charm. I can't put on the charm. No, you can't put on the charm. I can't put on the charm. And I can't grab him by the pussy either. That's the charm. I mean, remember that that's what he thinks the charm is. Granted that he, you know, I assume the move is different with Putin than it is with a model that he finds attractive. Like, in other words, he's not going to grab Putin in the junk. I don't know. Putin might hit him over that. Might not. Don't know. For sure. It would be speculation at this point to say that anything serious could happen. I've seen him, you know, pull the shirts up on kids and blow, you know, raspberries on their tummies. He might relish the contact. Don't know. Don't want to comment. Don't want to speculate. That, I think, would be irresponsible. But, you know, this guy, I can't put on the charm. Every time we hear about the charm, at least in his certainly with his interaction with women, the interaction is, boy, do you have a big set of boobs. I love those boobs. They're fantastic. I'm going to grab you by, you know, when you're a star, they let you. Come here, I'm going to kiss you. I just start kissing. It's automatic. Can you believe I'll be dating you in 10 years? If she wasn't my daughter, I'd be that's the sum total. That's the charm he wants to put on. But it's a guy, so we think he's not going to be that foolish. Even if we just say, all right, well, we have no reason to speculate on whether or not he would be so overtly sexual with those guys. His track record is, hey, you're a guy? Well, how about the boobs over there? Do you like those boobs? How about my daughter? She's so hot. I would be dating her if Madonna wants to go out with me so bad. This is the talk. Yeah. So it's still the same topic. He just doesn't say so to, as far as I know, to men because, with the hope in mind that they'll say, oh, I got to get some of that. Let me in on that. They instead will high five him and say, that's awesome because everybody's heterosexual because Trump is, I guess. I don't know. It's what seems to be the case. On the other hand, we don't know for sure what he does, but we do know publicly like how he treats other men. And that is, I try to grab their hands really fast when we're supposed to shake hands and crush their bones inside and make them look weak and like betas, as the right-wing, alt-right weirdos like to say. So he's playing the same game, with men. He's just grabbing them by different parts in order to intimidate them and make it look like he can get whatever he wants out of people. I don't think it's that different. I can put on the charm. I can't imagine this. So we know what the charm is with women, and with men, it's grabbing them by the hand and hurting them to make them look like they're weak in it. And all you have to do is know what's going on, and you're able, it's not like he's got superpowers. Just move your hand or squeeze him first. And he gave up on that tactic pretty quick, didn't he? That's funny. Should be marked. We should note that. I mean, that was a remarkably successful counterattack, and it's made him give up something that's apparently been a habit of his since forever. And we should not underestimate how powerful that was, and see if we can extrapolate from that or extract some lesson that we can apply and make him give up some other habitual annoyance. All right, more on the article here. As months passed, the president's options for improving relations with Russia narrowed. In late July, Congress overwhelmingly approved new sanctions on Moscow that were seen as a rebuke of Trump's efforts to reach out to Putin. It took aides 4 days to persuade Trump to sign the bill, which had cleared with a veto-proof majority. And, of course, he didn't have to sign it at all, but he didn't know that, probably. And it's really not worth telling him, and they wanted the PR of his actually signing it, I'm sure. Trump advisors were reluctant to even raise the topic of Russian interference in the election, which Trump equated with Democrats' efforts to undermine his victory. It's just kind of its own beast, whatever that means. A senior national security official said it's been a constant from day one. Gingrich and other Trump advisors said CIA Director Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State nominee, was one of the few advisors who could address Russia without raising the president's ire. Interesting. In January, Pompeo told the BBC that he had every expectation that Russia would make an effort to disrupt the 2018 midterm elections. Privately, he pushed Trump to take a tough line on Moscow. One area where aides worked to change Trump's mind was on a proposal to sell anti-tank missiles to Ukraine. Obama had opposed the move for fear of angering Moscow and provoking a Russian escalation. Trump initially was also hesitant to support the move, which had the backing of the Pentagon and the State Department. He would say, "Why is this our problem? Why not let Europeans deal with Ukraine?" a U.S. official said. Aides described a lobbying effort by Pompeo, Haley, and Defense Secretary Jim Mattis in support of the lethal aid. "I just want peace," Trump would say when pressed on Ukraine. That used to be peace through strength, but whatever, in the olden days. His aides countered that the weapons would help achieve peace by deterring further Russian aggression. See? To bring the president around, U.S. officials argued that the $47 million military aid package could be a boon to U.S. taxpayers if cash-strapped Kiev stabilized and someday became a reliable buyer of American military hardware. To the surprise of even his closest advisors, the president agreed late last year to the weapons transfer on the condition that the move be kept quiet and made without a formal news release. Aides tried to warn him that there was almost no way to stop the news from leaking. When it broke, Russia hawks in Congress praised the president. Another significant step in the right direction. That was McCain, a frequent Trump critic. But Trump was still furious, an administration official said. For some reason, when it comes to Russia, what is that reason? For some reason, when it comes to Russia, he doesn't hear the praise, a senior administration official said. Politically speaking, the best thing for him to do is to be tough. On that one issue, he cannot hear the praise. That is interesting. What an interesting point of weakness. The poisoning in Britain in early March of former Russian spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia with a nerve agent upped the tension between Trump and his advisors. Amazingly, not between Trump and Putin, but between Trump and his advisors. Initially, the president was hesitant to believe the intelligence that Russia was behind the attack. A fact that some aides attributed to his contrarian personality and tendency to look for deeper conspiracies. Attributed to his idiocy, that will cover all the bases. To persuade him, his advisors warned that he would get hammered in the press if he was out of step with U.S. allies, officials said. There was a sense that we couldn't be the only ones not to concede to reality, the Trump advisor said. We are on global warming, but whatever. The next task was convincing Trump that he should punish Putin in coordination with the Europeans. Why are you asking me to do this? Trump asked in a call with British Prime Minister Theresa May, according to a senior White House official. What's Germany going to do? What about France? Of course, why are you asking me to do this? NATO, Article 5, whatever. Well, are they going to do something? Yes, they are. The French certainly are. What about Germany? I don't know. I'm asking you because you're our closest ally. Oh, well, but give me another reason. He was insistent that the poisoning in the English city of Salisbury was largely a European problem and that the Allies should take the lead in moving against Russia. But why are they allies of yours? So that they can do these things on their own and just report back to you? Trump told aides in an Oval Office session on March 23rd that he was confident French President Emmanuel Macron would deliver on promises to expel Russian officials, but that he was worried about German Chancellor Angela Merkel, whose country depends on Russian oil and gas. It's a reasonable doubt to have, I guess. The next day, at his Mar-a-Lago resort, Trump's aides gave him the final memo with the precise number of American expulsions. He signed the order on the plane back to Washington. Trump was furious as news reports described the expulsions as the largest purge in U.S. history and noted the wide gap between the United States and its allies. If you had told me France and Germany were only doing 4, that's what we would have done, one official recalled him saying, even though we're much bigger. Whatever. Some officials said it was a simple misunderstanding. Others blamed the president's strained relationship with his top aides, including McMaster, his former national security advisor. Anytime McMaster came in with a recommendation, he always thought it was too much. The Trump advisor said there were just oil and water on everything. So his natural impulse was, if this is your recommendation, it must be too far. In the days since the expulsions, Trump has continued to take tough new actions to punish Russia, has he? Early this month, the administration sanctioned 17 other Russian officials and 7 oligarchs and their companies, prompting Russia's foreign ministry to threaten a harsh response. The sanctions were followed by an alleged chemical attack that killed dozens of Syrians in the rebel-held town of Douma, east of Syria's capital. President Putin, Russia, and Iran are responsible for backing Animal Assad, Trump tweeted in his first by-name criticism of the Russian leader. Big price to pay, except I hope it's small. The relatively modest airstrikes that Trump ordered Friday were designed to deter Assad from provoking a broader military conflict with Russia. To deter Assad without provoking a broader military conflict. Some European diplomats in Washington question whether the tough moves have Trump's full support. By now, of course, we find out they do not. This wouldn't be the policy unless Trump supported. Yes? Asked one ambassador. Not really sure. Russia analysts seem just as mystified. This is a man who, if he had his druthers, would be pursuing a much more open and friendly policy with Russia, said Angela Stent, former White House official and professor at Georgetown University. The U.S. essentially has 3 Russia policies: the president's, the executive branches, and Congress's. Less than a month after Trump shocked his foreign policy advisors by inviting Putin to the White House, the prospects for a visit anytime soon seem remote. No date has been set, White House officials said. We're not rushing to do this meeting, a senior administration official said. Our team wasn't thrilled about the idea. Oh my God, deep state. You're preventing me. You can't just be president. You're not letting me put on the charm. Trust me, you're better off this way. Honestly, even if you think you want to have a closer relationship. Anyway, that's an awful lot of time to spend on these things, but this is pretty important. And, it could lead to a major conflict and or the nuclear annihilation of all of us. So I think kind of worth spending some time on, even as exciting as the Michael Cohen news was and how much easier it would have been to spend days laughing about that. But let's see. What other thing? Oh, yes, I need to clarify from yesterday's show. I have not been able to dig up any direct proof of what I think now, looking back, was just confusion. The idea that the doorman at the Trump World Tower near the UN, coincidentally, that's our segue point, and I can't remember the guy's name. It's like Dino something, right? His first name is Dino, which is really amazing. One of my favorite characters from the Flintstones. I assume he's named after, no, probably not after him, but let's see if we can call that up by looking at Google News. But I think confused things and mistakenly said that, I did actually think I read somewhere that that he was represented by this same weirdo, mysterious lawyer who did, in fact, represent all of the women wrapped up in Trump. Well, the latest round of, I guess, Cohen / Trump / Broidy foibles. We learned that there was this one mysterious weirdo lawyer who keeps showing up representing the women. And I thought I had read somewhere that this guy, Keith Davidson, had also represented the doorman who apparently tried to sell his story to the National Enquirer about this alleged sixth Trump child. And without commenting on the likelihood that that actually is a true story or not, it turns out that I made some assumptions. It was, and his name was mixed in with some of the articles, not specifically about this lawyer, but they show up in a lot of the same articles, and the theme that emerges from some of these articles is that this guy was representing, Stormy Daniels in her dealings with Donald Trump, and Karen McDougal in her dealings with Trump, and I think now also this other second Playboy model in her dealings with Broidy. And then there were other mentions of other issues, because a lot of them also ran through, if they didn't run through Keith Davidson, the lawyer, they all had in common running through the National Enquirer and its parent company, AMI. And I think that's where the confusion sprung from. It may yet emerge that Davidson did represent the doorman as well, but I could not dig that up and prove that. So I had to go with the Fox question mark in yesterday's write-up that Scott put together for us. So just to be safe, we'll adopt Fox News journalistic standards. They've served them so well. How can we go wrong? All right, let's see. Other stories that we can turn to there, and again, man, there's so much. I think we probably should have spent more time on Broidy and his latest foibles, and because it's so unbelievable, the story of the Playboy model that he had an affair with and impregnated and paid $1.6 million to shut up and go away is an interesting story all by itself. But I wanted to remind you of where else. It's just weird that this is yet another entanglement with Trump world that Broidy's got. I find it amazing that, I guess I don't find it amazing that he would independently also be having affairs, and that he would independently also be having affairs with Playboy models. I suppose if you're a billionaire type person and want to have affairs with people, 9 times out of 10, these not particularly sophisticated folks will say, well, where could or should I have such an affair? I know. I will be universally praised if I am betting Playboy models. The heterosexual community values them very highly, and so perhaps I will take my trophy there. That's not such a big surprise. I guess what's a weird surprise, and it's also not a surprise that he would maybe get her pregnant, and that he would conclude the thing to do is, 1, push her to have an abortion, 2, try to pay her off to stay quiet. That's what billionaire boys are likely to do in such a situation. What is weird, really, literally just strange, is that he would say, I need Michael Cohen's help in this. I mean, Michael Cohen hasn't been particularly successful in keeping Trump's affairs quiet. Read a newspaper, for one thing. For another, it's just, you know what? This is my own thing. And although Donald Trump and I share our proclivity for having affairs with Playboy models, and we might have come to that conclusion independently, or it may have been me playing at being Donald Trump. I don't know. That's a deep-seated psychological question, and we're not qualified to opine on that here. But it's just weird that he decided, of all the lawyers in the world that he wanted to take care of it, one, that was A, inept, and two, connected to the president. Why did he, and three, that he has only, at that point, one other client. It doesn't make any sense to opt to do that unless you're really looking for trouble. Add to that the facts that we know about what he's been mixed up in for the president. It's just overwhelmingly weird. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Letting the music play all the way through here as I search my archives for the stories about Broidy. But, you know, Pocket's search is notoriously unreliable, and I think it only kind of searches headlines. So maybe what I'll need to look for is stories about the Seychelles. Just to remind everybody, what that story was, and why would we transfer to that one? Because to date, that has been chiefly a story about Eric Prince, about the United Arab Emirates, and about, of course, the effort to establish a back channel to the Kremlin. That was always the focus of that stuff. And is this one of the articles that makes particular mention of Broidy? If not, I mean, then we can say, long story short, Broidy keeps coming up in these things, and it was really unclear, like, why he had anything at all to do with it. Where's this? Is there a mention of him? I'm going to skim through this story. I'm looking at one we've discussed in the past. Mueller gathers evidence that 2017 Seychelles meeting was effort to establish back channel to Kremlin. In headline speak, this is a March 7th piece by Sari Horowitz and Devlin Barrett, and goes through the basics as we put them out there. Mueller's investigating. It's an event of January 2017. Eric Prince from Blackwater meeting with a Russian official close to Putin, and claiming that it was just sort of coincidental. He was in town really to talk to the officialdom of the United Arab Emirates, though, you know, Prince lives in the United Arab Emirates. Why he would have to go to the Seychelles to talk to people who are the ruling faction of the country he lives in was never explained. And that's also where we see other names intersecting. Remember George Nader? We haven't heard much about him lately, but the Lebanese-American businessman who helped organize and attend the Seychelles meeting, and who had testified before a grand jury saying, yeah, most of what Eric Prince says about how that meeting happened and why isn't true. And the other folks on hand, Kirill Dmitriev, the head of a Russian government-controlled wealth fund. This is what Prince said was a big accident. Just happened to run into him at the hotel bar. I was hanging out there to talk to the leadership of the UAE, which is where I live, and it was in a bar, and Muslims aren't supposed to drink, but okay, whatever. We know they're rather permissive with themselves. when they are abroad. And I guess if you owned a country, you would be too. So then lots of discussion about Mueller's interest in whether or not there was a back channel communications network being established. And they bring in more, there's more looking at Nader. They drop the names of others close to the UAE leadership and to Nader himself, including Steve Bannon and Jared Kushner. As I recall, I say in this article doesn't make mention of Brody, but my recollection is, and I'm just trying to prove to myself that it's the case by seeing if I can dig it up, and I'm not, it's like I'm having trouble finding Brody in this. It's almost as if, could it be that we have it wrong, or do we not finding the right write-up of it, or have they gone back in time and erased Brody's name from all this? I can't remember why it is. Maybe Google would be the better machine for this, but let's see. Elliot Brody and Seychelles. I mean, we do have this correct, don't we? How two Gulf monarchies sought to influence the White House, the New York Times writing it up. Here we go, and now it's a little closer. And then Business Insider, how a little-known GOP fundraiser got Trump to reshape U.S. foreign policy. Here we go. Oh, Armando's going to check in with us here. Hey, Armando, how you doing?
Hey, I want to step in, give you 5 minutes to find your Brody material.
Okay, I think I'm finding it. But yeah, sure, go ahead.
To give a recap of what I think Judge Kimball Wood did yesterday, because
excellent.
I think CNN really misinformed people at the end of the day on it. So
I could see everybody dropping that ball just because. Sean Hannity! Oh, my God.
I know, but they actually did miss it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Take a minute and give me 3 minutes to explain why I think everybody's getting it. At least CNN is getting it wrong.
Okay.
Or got it wrong yesterday. And it's the following. Remember why they were in court. Michael Cohen filed a motion for injunctive relief, both as a TRO and as a preliminary injunction, to stop the DOJ from looking at his materials because it would violate the attorney-client privilege. The government responded, don't worry, we've got a taint team. Before anything is used, our taint team will go through and pull out privileged materials. That was acceptable to Cohen, and he went to court instead, and they had their various motions, including the Hannity reveal happens because the judge reasonably says, well, fine, tell me who your clients are so we can see what the risk here is. And, of course, he disclosed Trump, Brody, who you're looking for information on right now.
Yeah.
And mystery number 3, which turned out to be Sean Hannity. And off they went. Now, after all that drama, what did she decide at the end? She said, well, here's how we're going to do it. You, taint team for the DOJ, will review documents, but share it. But as you review, you show the other side, you show the defense what it is you're reviewing, and you make your initial cut. And if you don't exclude things that they believe should be excluded, we'll figure out how to resolve that dispute. Maybe by a special master, maybe not. Maybe you come back to me. That's what she decided. And, of course, what the CNN did was it turned that into GOJ must share materials with Cohen. Cohen has the materials. Literally 90% of them. Some on the paper he may not have, but most of it was just electronic imaging.
Okay, I see. Yeah, okay.
So there's no win here for Trump. And I saw John Dean say too, this is a win for – it's not a win. There was always going to be a chance for Cohen and his client really, as we've said, Trump, to dispute the designation of not privileged by the government. They would have been able to say, wait, you didn't exclude documents 7, 52, 99, 107, 40, 445. Those are privileged. And they would go to an arbiter and then maybe a special master in the first case to say, well, I find in favor of Trump, or I find in favor of the government's characterization on these particular documents, or I split the baby. They're right on some of them, they're wrong on others, which would have been the normal process. There was no win here for Trump. He didn't really have much of a chance to win. Let's be clear on that. Once you accept, and no one's really challenging that the search was legal, at least no one's challenging it now. There may be a suppression motion at some future time.
Yeah.
But in essence, the process was a victory for the government, in my view, because they're going to do the cut. And then that cut's going to be, challenged as required by Cohen or Trump. And it'll go to a special master most likely. She did not make a decision on the special master. It could be that she makes the decision. But that was always going to be the process. Nothing happened. We didn't have to have this motion. This is one of the things that Tucker Carlson said, oh, look at this. It's not fair that Sean Hannity's consultation with Michael Cohen became public. Well, it became public for two reasons. Michael Cohen's a crook, or at least alleged to be a crook. And second of all, Michael Cohen said, I need to protect Sean Hannity's attorney-client privilege.
Yeah.
If Sean Hannity has said, don't worry about me to Cohen over the weekend, don't even mention me, I don't care about the attorney-client privilege, Michael Cohen wouldn't have had to list him.
Okay. Yeah.
So all of that wouldn't have happened if he wouldn't have said there was a mystery number 3. If he had said it was just Trump and Brady, nothing else. Sean Hannity would never have come into this. But he made his choices. Anyway, that's the story. I don't know if you found your Brody material yet.
Yes.
And if you're ready to go, I will hand the show back to you. And I just wanted to give you a chance to locate what you wanted to say about Brody, who sounds like a pretty dirty character in his own right.
He's a mysterious figure, certainly. And yes. By the way, by the way, as far as appointing a special master goes, any word on that, or what's the reasoning behind it? Is it just to avoid any?
I would say, exactly? Frankly, it is for the judge to insulate herself. At the end of the day, she's going to be the final word. Suppose the special master makes a decision. Here's what happens in court, and this would be analogous, I believe. You can refer things to a magistrate, but if you don't accept it as a final word, a magistrate could issue what's called a report and recommendation, and that gets submitted to the judge, and then people either say that the magistrate was wrong on their report and recommendation, the magistrate was right on their report and recommendation, and then the judge decides whether she agrees or disagrees with the report and recommendation. I think this would be a similar situation. A special master will issue a report and recommendation on the disputes. It would go to Judge Wood, who would make the final determination. Of course, people could take appeals and so on and so forth. But in essence, it's just someone who takes the first pass. Most times the judge does adopt the report and recommendation. Generally, there's good basis for what the report and recommendation says, or even if you disagree, and you go from there. So who is it going to be? They're supposedly going to be submitting or trying to work out somebody they all agree with. That probably won't happen. So they'll submit acceptable ones, and the judge will probably pick from a list. She says she wants to do it quickly, so I would expect something by the middle of the week, Wednesday or Thursday. And what's going to be speeded up the process is because they're going to be basically going on a rolling basis, hand in hand, the government making its determinations, Cohen objecting. Presumably, once a week they'll go to the master with a batch of documents and say, here's where we dispute. The magistrate will make a ruling, and so on and so forth. So hopefully it's all wrapped up within a month or two, and they go from there.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on that one, and I know it's been actually kind of also entertaining watching people say, as we mentioned, of course, Kimba Wood having been nominated briefly as Attorney General to be Attorney General during the Clinton administration, and watching
a more innocent time.
Yes, watching right-wing Twitter say, aha, Clinton, and I guess ignoring the fact that, well, how did Kimba Wood come to Bill Clinton's attention? Service on the Southern District of New York federal bench. How'd she get there? Magic. You know, the answer is Ronald Reagan.
I believe she was Ronald Reagan
Yeah.
appointed her. But to be clear, it's more likely, as I think Lawrence O'Donnell explained last night, it was really a Moynihan pick at the time. And
interesting.
She's a longtime judge. She's got a very good reputation. She's an intelligent, diligent person. Even Republicans accept that. I mean,
I guess so. They nominated her. I just by way of Wikipedia again, which tells me next to they throw out plausible facts. We'll see, but it's interesting. She's listed here in the beginning of her federal judicial service as having been the recommendation of Senator D'Amato. Now that may have been as a favor to Senator Moynihan, perhaps, but. So December 87. So I'm not even certain who was there at that point alongside D'Amato, but it may well have been.
At the time, it was Javits at first, and then D'Amato continued with that deal.
Yeah.
So it was, they would do this. Yeah, you're right. The 75-25 deal that they would agree. When we're in power, I get 3 to your 1. When you're in power, you get 3 to my 1.
So, yeah, it's entirely possible that the fact in December of 1987 being recommended by D'Amato isn't the same thing as having been recommended by D'Amato later for different reasons.
Oh, she was right. I mean, she may have been called a D'Amato recommendation, but I'm fairly positive it was Moynihan's.
I see what you mean. Yeah, that's
finger.
That's why these things. It's interesting. You got to list some name on the historical documents. Yes, but was it because Senator Al D'Amato said, you know who I like is Kimba Wood? Maybe not. So, all right. Well, anyway, interesting background. Yeah, I found the material I was looking for. Thank you very much.
Let me let you get back to that.
I'll do that.
Think Broidy's story is one of the more fascinating corruption stories
what
that
the
people
hell is this
don't
guy
pay
doing
that much
here?
attention to.
Yeah, again, all credit to our Twitter friend BJ Hutch, our Montreal girl, who keeps pointing him out for some unknown reason, and now has me wondering whether we need to tail her and find out what's going on.
I'll hang up and listen, as they say in the radio business.
Right. Okay. So what I got here is thank you.
Thank you.
What I've got is 2 pieces here. I got a New York Times, how 2 Gulf monarchies sought to influence the White House, and the Business Insider with the more direct line in their headline, how a little-known Republican fundraiser allegedly profited off of Trump's presidency and worked to convince him to change U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. It sounds a little juicier, doesn't it? Michael Kranz wrote this piece. Don't know if it was one of the ones that we were sent, but March 28th of this year. And to save time, let's hit the bullet points up at the top. Business Insider knows that my time is valuable because business something, something, something. And they put all the juicy stuff up top here. Republican fundraiser Elliot Broidy has emerged as an influential figure in President Donald Trump's Washington and has often used shady deals. What? Shady deals to boost his own business while offering clients access to the president. Okay. A type of corruption we're familiar with. I'll say that. Broidy cooperated with businessman and United Arab Emirates advisor George Nader to shift U.S. policy in favor of the UAE's agenda, and at one point even suggested to Trump that he fire Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. Tillerson was removed earlier this month. That would have been earlier in March. Broidy has sued Qatar, the country, for what he claims has been a smear campaign against him. Wow, I forgot about that one. I wonder if we can get more details about this. I think it's roughly structured to follow these bullet points here. I see section 2 of the article, Broidy has a history of shady business deals. And that is always going to be interesting. Maybe we should skim a little bit of that and see how shady he is. We just say that he's got shady business deals, and we believe it because he's in close proximity to Trump. And one of the shady deals, though not necessarily a business deal, that we know of is paying $1.6 million to the Playboy model that he got pregnant. Broidy reportedly first became interested in political involvement after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. That does happen. And joined a pro-Israel lobbying group. That'll ring bells for a lot of you right away. As a result, amid almost 2 decades of political involvement and fundraising for the Bush administration, he served on the Homeland Security Council from 2005 to 2009, and in 2013, he was also bizarrely, that's what they say, the executive producer of 2 independent films, Sugar and Snake and Mongoose. I don't know what makes it so bizarre, especially given that our Treasury Secretary also is a executive producer of films. And I don't know what makes them independent if he's the producer of them, but whatever. I don't know. Independent, I guess, of studios. I don't know how that whole system works. After jumping aboard Trump's campaign and later becoming involved with the RNC, National Deputy Finance Chair, Broidy started to leverage his relationship with the president to bolster his own business interests. Not surprising. Broidy, it's wrong, it's just not surprising. Broidy owns a company called Circinus, I guess, or Circinus, Circinus, that has hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts in the UAE, according to the New York Times, and in the years since Trump's inauguration has marketed his connections to Trump to Circinus's potential clients, whatever they buy from him, I don't know. Among the perks he has offered were a spot at a candlelit dinner with the president for Congolese strongman. What? Among the perks he has offered a spot at a candlelit dinner with the president for Congolese strongman. A Congolese strongman? An invitation to a party at one of Trump's hotels for Romanian politicians charged with corruption. I'm sure even if they weren't charged with corruption, he would have offered it, but that was an added bonus. These guys are already corrupt. And an exclusive meeting with Republican lawmakers at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida for Angolan politicians. Interesting. So he's offering these perks to foreign dignitaries, not even to Americans, goddammit. On top of these questionable overtures, Broidy has also reportedly been in negotiations with a businessman at the center of a Malaysian corruption scandal who at one point offered him $75 million if a Justice Department investigation into the scandal, whatever it was dropped, the Wall Street Journal reported. He also offered to help a Russian lawyer get a Russian company off U.S. sanctions lists last year, according to Bloomberg. These sorts of deals have landed Broidy in hot water before. In 2009, he entered into a plea deal for giving almost $1 million in bribes to New York State pension authorities in exchange for their investment in his fund, the Markstone Capital Group. So he gave them $1 million and they invested in his fund. Why not just put the $1 million in your own fund? I don't know. Whatever. Broidy's involvement with the UAE is the next section here. He's long shared the UAE's animosity toward Qatar and has backed this policy position up with contracts for Circinus in the country. But he first became involved in their efforts in Washington after meeting Nader, George Nader. It was shortly after Nader met with Blackwater founder and Trump associate Eric Prince and a Russian banker in the Seychelles in early 2017 that Broidy began to actively work with him to cultivate Trump and to sway his administration to support Emirati objectives. According to the AP, Nader wired Broidy $2.5 million through a Canadian bank in order to finance a lobbying effort to turn U.S. politicians against Qatar. Broidy later contributed almost $600,000 to GOP politicians in Congress, and he sponsored a press conference on Qatar's alleged state sponsorship of terrorism a month afterward. He gave a sympathetic congressman who introduced a bill advancing Broidy's agenda thousands of dollars in campaign gifts. So just by way of checking here, $2.5 million comes in from Nader. $600,000 goes out to members of Congress, maybe a little bit more after this bill gets introduced. That means $1.9 million of the $2.5 million is left. Sponsored a conference on Qatar's alleged state sponsorship of terrorism a month later. How much do you think that would cost? He's got $300,000 to play with in that. I mean, he's got access to other capital. I'm just saying, if he spends $600,000 out of the $2.5 million that Nader sends him, and then also sends $1.6 million to the Playboy Playmate model, whatever, that he gets pregnant. That leaves $300,000 that he could use, say, to sponsor a conference on Qatar's alleged sponsorship of terrorism without dipping into his funds elsewhere. Just saying, I don't know. But all money being fungible, you're on solid ground saying that's how he used the money. That's just the truth of fungibility. Brody and Nader also lobbied Trump personally, and Trump eventually joined the UAE in condemning Qatar in the diplomatic row that took place last year. You know all about the blockade and Kushner's interest in it as well, not mentioned to this point in this article. Let's see. Brody also pushed pro-UAE policies during a meeting he had with Trump in late 2017, during which he encouraged Trump to meet one-on-one with the Crown Prince of UAE, MBZ, or Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Nahyan, I guess. Okay, but throughout these questionable moves, Brody has maintained that he has done nothing improper. Recent reports regarding my involvement with activity that is subject to investigative and law enforcement scrutiny are absolutely false, Brody tweeted, except now we know that at least in one area he did do these things. Nor did I inappropriately influence the Trump administration regarding the administration's foreign policy. I am starting to wonder whether he thought he would grow closer to Trump if he started having sex with a Playboy model and then bribed her to keep quiet. I don't know. I got to find out what the timeline is with this relationship with the model. I don't know if that's been mentioned. Brody maintains that the information that had been provided to the Times, the AP, the Wall Street Journal was illegally hacked by Qatari operatives. And on Monday, he sued the government of Qatar, alleging a targeted smear campaign. By the way, did they ever at any point smear him with, I heard he got a Playboy model pregnant and paid for an abortion? That's a good question. Let's see. This article, it says, has been corrected to reflect that the nearly $600,000 Brody used to contribute to GOP politicians did not come from the $2.5 million he allegedly received from Nader. But of course, I don't know why Business Insider would agree to print that as, again, all cash being fungible. There's really no reason to believe that. It may have come later in time, but of course that would only have allowed him to advance against or borrow against his own funds, the $600,000 to contribute to Republican politicians. There's no point in saying that there is any difference in them. All money is fungible. That's just the stone cold truth of it. Let's see. Trump fundraiser Elliot Brody sues Qatar, alleging cyber smear campaign, was the linked article here. I'll just make some mention of it before we exit out of today's show. A March 26th piece in the Washington Post. I'm sure it doesn't have anything in here about his having had an affair, but it's pretty interesting that this guy is wrapped up in a little bit of everything. And there's really, I'm still puzzled as to how it is that he shows up in the middle of, I can understand showing up in the middle of fundraising and showing up in the middle of foreign policy. It shouldn't happen, but it does happen. And okay, he rises to prominence in the Republican Party, and he says he has an interest in foreign policy, and he has some business interests there. Trump, not knowing any better or not knowing to avoid it, is gonna cross that line and put him in charge. And maybe other presidents do too. My big question mark is, where does the relationship turn to the more weirdly intimate and personal one? If that's, and maybe they wouldn't describe it there. They certainly would try to describe it in some other way. It's just coincidence that I share the same lawyer, that the lawyer only has 2, maybe 3 clients, and that he's doing for me exactly the sort of work that he's being investigated for doing for the president. And I guess that's weird. And maybe that's just locker room talk between the two of them. And he says, hey, if you knock up that model, I got a guy who can fix it for you. You know him. It's Michael Cohen. I believe there's more to be dug out there. Although, honestly, I don't know that it's going to bear any fruit. I just wanted to remind you that Elliot Broidy, whose name is now rising to prominence with respect to having paid off this Playboy model, rose to prominence as a dirty character, or should have risen to prominence as a dirty character on substantive grounds first, and as much as his name kept coming up, people were really just not taking notice of him, except for BJ Hutch and I guess us. Thanks for sending us all that information. Time to hand the microphones over to Justice Putnam for his program next. We'll be back tomorrow with Greg and Joan. And then, of course, the home stretch, trying to fit in all the things that I've been thinking I wanted to read to you based on the review of the day's news and further outrages, and we'll see what we can do with that on Thursday and Friday. But first, as I mentioned, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy up next. Let's get to some of the substance here. Senator Chris Murphy considers Trump's slow-motion car crash foreign policy as further proof that Donnie Two Scoops has been compromised by Vladimir Putin. It's hard to disagree. Then on the rest of the menu, Trump is raking in millions from his campaign slush fund to pay those steep legal fees.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Here's some other good stuff. Let's see. California puts a halt to Trump's border wall plan by refusing to send state troops to help. And Trump jokes about firing Bolton after only 1 week on the job. Ha ha. What about the rest of the program? Well, you'll have to stay tuned to figure out what else of the good stuff he's got coming up. I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.